justice, and melancholy. In 2015, an 8-year-old girl vanished from her home in Bali. Her mother went on national TV, weeping, begging kidnappers to bring her back. The entire country searched the forests and the streets, but they were looking too far. While the world prayed for her return, the police were standing right on top of the answer, and it wasn't a stranger.
Bali police have submitted the investigation into the murder of 8-year-old Angeline.
Bali, the island of the gods. When you think of Bali, you think of golden beaches, ancient temples, and spiritual peace. It is a place where millions of tourists flock every year to find serenity. But in May 2015, the world looked at Bali and saw something else, something ugly. It started with a poster taped to telephone poles and shared on Facebook. It showed a sweet, thin face, a little girl with deep brown eyes and a shy smile. Her name was Angeline. According to her wealthy adoptive mother, Marguerite Megawe, Angeline had disappeared while playing in the front yard of their villa on Sedat Malam Street. What followed was one of the biggest manhunts in Indonesian history. Celebrities tweeted about it. Government ministers flew in from Jakarta. Even spiritual mediums were called to use magic to find the child. For nearly a month, the story was about a missing child and a grieving mother. But as the days turned into weeks, the police began to realize that the grieving mother's performance was just that, a performance. Before we step into the timeline of this tragedy, if you are new here, welcome to Midnight Files. We shine a light on the cases the world forgets. Please subscribe and turn on the dark mode. Let's begin. To understand the tragedy of Angeline's death, we first have to understand the tragedy of her birth. The story begins in 2007 in a small clinic in Bali. A woman named Hamida had just given birth to a beautiful baby girl, but instead of joy, there was despair. Hamida and her husband, Rosidi, were extremely poor. They already had 2 other children and were struggling to put food on the table. They couldn't pay the hospital Belsa de delivery, which was around 800,000 rupiah, about $60 US. It was a small amount for many, but a fortune for them. Enter Marguerite Megawe. Marguerite was 52 years old at the time. She was the wife of an American man named Douglas Scarborough. They were wealthy, they lived in a big house, and they seemed like the answer to Hamida's prayers. Marguerite offered to pay the hospital bill. In exchange, she wanted to adopt the baby. For Hamida, it was the hardest decision a mother could make. But she looked at the wealthy woman and she thought, my daughter will be a princess. She will have good food, a good education, and a life I can never give her. So a deal was struck. But this wasn't just a verbal agreement. It was a contract. Marguerite had a notary draw up adoption papers, but there was a strange, chilling clause in the documents. The biological parents, Hamida and Rosidi, were forbidden from seeing their daughter ever again. They were not allowed to contact her until she turned 18. If they tried to see her, they would have to pay back all the money Marguerite had spent. Essentially, the baby was sold. Marguerite named her Angeline, and for a brief moment, it seemed like the fairy tale might come true. Angeline had a father, Douglas, who reportedly loved her. She had a big house, but the fairy tale didn't last long. A few years after the adoption, Angeline's adoptive father, Douglas, passed away. This was the turning point. With Douglas gone, the mask of the happy family fell off. Marguerite Megawe was left alone in the large house on Sedat Malam Street, and slowly, the house began to change. Marguerite developed a hoarding problem, but not just with objects, with animals. She began collecting chickens, hundreds of them. She also had dozens of cats and dogs. The once beautiful villa turned into a farm. The marble floors were covered in animal waste. The smell of ammonia and feces became unbearable. And in the middle of this filth lived Angeline. She wasn't treated as a daughter. She was treated as unpaid labor. According to neighbors, Angeline's day didn't start with breakfast and cartoons. It started with work. She had to wake up before dawn to feed the chickens. She had to clean the cages. She had to scrub the floors. If she missed a spot or if a chicken went missing, Marguerite would fly into a rage. Teachers at her school began to notice disturbing signs. Angeline was a second grader at the local elementary school. She would arrive late, looking exhausted. Her uniform was often dirty and unwashed. But the most noticeable thing was the smell. Angeline smelled so strongly of chicken manure and cat urine that other students refused to sit next to her. The teachers, out of pity, would sometimes bathe her at school and wash her hair because it was matted with dirt. She was also starving. While Marguerite lived in luxury, Angeline was malnourished. One teacher recalled a heartbreaking moment when Angeline complained of a headache. The teacher asked, "Have you eaten?" Angeline replied, "No, I only had a little water." Sometimes she was so hungry that she reportedly ate the dry corn meant for the chickens. The teachers tried to help. The school principal, a woman named Katuruda, was so concerned that she actually summoned Marguerite to the school. She asked, "Why is Angeline so thin? Why is she dirty?" Marguerite was furious. She reportedly told the principal, "It's none of your business. She is my daughter. I raise her how I want." Because there was no strong child protective services system in place at the time, the school felt helpless. They sent Angeline back home, back to the nightmare.
The nightmare culminated on May 16th, 2015. This is the day the world was told Angeline disappeared. According to Marguerite's initial statement to the police, Angeline had been playing in the front yard of the house around 3 p.m. Marguerite said she was inside the house. When she came out a short while later, Angeline was gone. She claimed that the gate was open and someone must have snatched her. Marguerite immediately called her adult daughters from a previous marriage, Yvonne and Christina. They helped her file a police report. Within hours, the news spread. Missing child cases in Bali are rare. The community was shocked. Posters were printed. A Facebook page titled "Find Angeline, Bali's Missing Child" was launched. It gained thousands of likes. Marguerite played the role of the devastated mother perfectly. She sat in her front yard, weeping into a handkerchief as reporters shoved microphones in her face. She said, "I just want my baby back. Please, if anyone has her, bring her home." She announced a 40 million rupiah reward. It was a performance worthy of an Oscar. The police launched a massive operation. They checked the CCTV cameras of nearby hotels and villas. Nothing. They interviewed neighbors. No one had seen a strange car or a suspicious person. It was as if Angeline had dissolved into the air. As the search entered its second week, the atmosphere began to shift. Public sympathy started turning into suspicion. Why? Because of Marguerite's behavior. High-profile government officials arrived to help. The Indonesian Minister for Administrative Reform visited the house to offer support. But when he arrived at the gate, Marguerite refused to let him in. She told her security guards to block the minister. She said she was too depressed to see anyone. This was bizarre. Usually, parents of missing children welcome any help, especially from the government. Then the Minister of Social Empowerment came. She demanded to see Angeline's room. Reluctantly, Marguerite let her in, but only to the front room. The minister noted the smell, the overpowering stench of hundreds of chickens and dogs. She saw the filth. She asked, "How could a child live here?" But Marguerite insisted that Angeline was happy and loved. The police also faced resistance. Every time they tried to search the backyard extensively, Marguerite would get angry or unleash her dogs. She claimed the dogs were for protection, but it felt more like they were guarding something. The police were also hindered by the spiritual culture of Bali. Marguerite hired dukuns, or spirit mediums. These mediums walked around the property, chanting. One medium claimed, "The child is gone. She has been taken by spirits to another island." These false spiritual leads wasted valuable time, sending police on wild goose chases across Bali. But there was one person in the house who knew the truth, a man named Agus Tay. He was the domestic helper. He had been hired just weeks before Angeline disappeared. He was a quiet man from a poor island nearby. During the search, Agus was interviewed by the media. He looked nervous. He mumbled. He told reporters, "I don't know where she is," but his eyes told a different story.
It is frustrating to see how this system failed this child for so long, and how easily a wealthy family blocked the investigation. If you believe Angeline's story needs to be heard, please hit the like button on this video. It helps us spread awareness. Now, let's get to the discovery. 3 weeks had passed. The pressure on the Bali police was immense. The public demanded answers. On June 10, 2015, the police decided they had enough of Marguerite's games. They obtained a stronger warrant. This time, they weren't just going to look around. They were going to turn the house upside down. A team of officers entered the compound. They pushed past the barking dogs. They walked through the sea of chickens. They went straight to the backyard. The backyard was a disaster zone. Piles of bamboo, rotting trash, and chicken feed were scattered everywhere. But near the chicken coop, the kandang ayam, an officer noticed something odd. There was a mound of earth. It was covered with bamboo leaves and trash, but the soil underneath looked softer than the rest of the yard. It looked fresh. Also, the smell in that specific corner was worse than the animal smell. It was the sickly sweet scent of decay. The police chief ordered his men to dig. They grabbed shovels. 1 foot down, just dirt. 2 feet down, the shovel hit something soft. It wasn't a rock, it was fabric. They cleared the dirt away and found a bundle wrapped in a light-colored bedsheet. The officers froze. Slowly, carefully, they lifted the bundle out of the hole. They peeled back the dirty sheet. Inside, curled up in the fetal position, was the decomposing body of Angeline. She was still wearing the clothes she had on the day she disappeared. But there was one detail that broke the hearts of even the toughest policemen there. Angeline was clutching a doll. It was her favorite doll. Whoever buried her had thrown it in the hole with her. Marguerite was inside the house when the discovery was made. When the police arrested her, she didn't scream. She didn't cry. She looked stone cold.
Justice and melancholy. The body was taken to the Sangla General Hospital for an autopsy. The results were horrific. Angeline's skull was fractured. She had suffered severe brain trauma from blunt force impact. Her small body was covered in cigarette burns, and around her neck there was a ligature mark. She had been strangled. Back at the police station, the investigation took a chaotic turn. Police arrested Marguerite, her 2 adult daughters, and the helper, Auguste Hai. Under intense interrogation, Auguste cracked first, but his initial confession was shocking. He told the police, "I did it. I killed her. I raped her, and then I buried her." The public was furious. They wanted Auguste's head, but the detectives weren't convinced. Why would a gardener kill the child, bury her carefully with her doll, and then stay in the house working for weeks? Also, Auguste's story kept changing. He seemed terrified. Finally, after days of questioning, Auguste broke down completely. He retracted his confession. He looked at the detectives and said, "I didn't kill her. Mother did." Auguste laid out the real sequence of events. He said that on May 16th, he heard screaming coming from Marguerite's bedroom. He heard Angeline crying, "Mama, stop. Mama, it hurts." Then silence. Auguste said Marguerite called him into the room. He saw Angeline lying on the floor. She was gasping for air. She was dying. Marguerite didn't call an ambulance. Instead, she looked at Auguste and said, "If you tell anyone, I will have you killed." She then made him an offer. She promised him 200 million rupiah, about $15,000, a life-changing amount of money for a poor laborer. All he had to do was help her hide the body. According to Auguste, Marguerite ordered him to dig the hole behind the chicken coop. He said Marguerite placed the doll in the hole. She wanted to make it look like Angeline was sleeping. They covered the hole with dirt, bamboo, and chicken feed to hide the smell. And then Marguerite went inside, washed her hands, and began her month-long performance as the grieving mother. Now the police had the who and the how, but they needed the why. Why would a wealthy, educated woman murder an 8-year-old girl she had adopted? The investigation revealed a sinister motive rooted in greed. Remember the adoption papers? It turned out that Angeline's late father, Douglas, had left a significant inheritance, but there was a clause in his will. A large portion of the money was designated for Angeline's care. Marguerite wanted access to that money. However, investigators believed that Marguerite viewed Angeline as a burden. She hated the girl, but she couldn't just give her back, or she would lose the claim to the inheritance. The little girl was simply an obstacle to her wealth. The trial began in late 2015, and it gripped the nation. The Denpasar District Court was packed every single day. Crowds gathered outside, screaming, "Witch!" and demanding the death penalty. Hamida and Rosidi, Angeline's biological parents, attended the trial. When they saw Marguerite, Hamida screamed in agony, "You promised to take care of her. You killed my baby." Marguerite Magawe stood trial for premeditative murder. She denied everything. She looked the judge in the eye and said, "I loved my daughter. I did not kill her. Auguste is lying." Her defense team tried to paint Auguste as the lone killer, a predator who attacked the child. But the forensic evidence told a different story. Blood spatter was found in Marguerite's bedroom, consistent with August's testimony. The timeline of abuse described by teachers matched the injuries on the body. And then there was the behavior, the fake tears, the blocking of the police. Auguste Tai also stood trial. He was charged with aiding and abetting the murder and concealing the corpse. He sat with his head bowed, weeping, apologizing to Angeline's biological parents. On February 29, 2016, Judgment Day arrived. The judge read out the verdict to a silent courtroom. Marguerite Magawe was found guilty of premeditative murder, child exploitation, and domestic violence. The prosecution had asked for life imprisonment. The judge agreed. Marguerite was sentenced to life in prison. She showed no emotion as the gavel came down. She simply turned to her lawyers to discuss an appeal. Auguste Tai was found guilty of concealing the corpse. Because he had eventually told the truth and helped solve the case, the judge was lenient. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Angeline's body was returned to her biological parents. They buried her in their home village in Banyuwangi, East Java. Her funeral was attended by thousands. People who had never met her came to say goodbye. They brought flowers, they brought toys, and they brought dolls. Hundreds of dolls to replace the dirty one she was found with. The case of Angeline Magawe changed Indonesia. It forced the government to look closely at adoption laws. It forced schools to pay attention to the signs of abuse. It stripped away the illusion that wealth equals safety. Marguerite Magawe had money, status, and power, but she lacked the one thing that matters most: humanity. Today, the house on Sedat Malam Street stands empty. The chickens are gone, the noise is gone. But locals say that sometimes, when you pass by the rusted gates, you feel a heaviness in the air, a reminder of the little princess who lived like a prisoner, and the mother who cried on TV while standing on her daughter's grave. Rest in peace, Angeline. We upload in-depth investigations every week. If you value this kind of research, please support the channel by subscribing and commenting your thoughts on this case below. I'm your host from Midnight Files. I'll see you in the dark.